The veil was suffocating her. Evelyn Carter stood at the altar of St. Michael's Cathedral. 500 guests, 12 white roses, and a man she didn't love waiting for her answer. Alexander Delacroix looked perfect. Tailored suit, easy smile, empty eyes. Her mother had gripped her hands that morning. "Don't you dare ruin this, Evelyn." Not, "Are you happy?" Not, "Do you love him?" Just, "Don't ruin this." So Evelyn smiled, nodded, let them lace her into a dress that cost more than her dignity. Now the priest was speaking, and she couldn't hear a word over the roaring in her own chest. Her eyes drifted to the back pew. An elderly woman sat alone. Navy dress, silver hair. No escort, no family. Just piercing eyes locked directly on Evelyn like she could see straight through the white gown and the performance and the fear underneath it all. The woman wasn't watching Alexander. She was watching Evelyn, like she was waiting for something. Evelyn snapped her gaze back to Alexander. His family filled the front row like marble statues. His father Richard, cold and silver-haired. His brother Marcus, already checking his watch. One seat, empty at the far end. I don't love him. The thought hit like ice water. I never did. She looked into Alexander's eyes and saw nothing looking back. No warmth, no nerves. Just a man closing a deal. Her fingers loosened around the roses. Then, a crash from the back of the cathedral. The elderly woman had collapsed. The roses hit the marble floor, and Evelyn ran. What would you have done? Comment below. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Because what happens next will leave you speechless. She was already moving before her brain caught up. Wedding dress hiked to her knees. Heels cracking against marble. Evelyn pushed through the frozen crowd like they were furniture. Nobody moved. Nobody helped. 500 people stood there with their phones half raised and their mouths open, watching an old woman dying on the floor like it was a scene in a movie. Evelyn hit her knees beside the woman hard enough to bruise. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" She pressed 2 fingers to the woman's neck. Pulse. Weak, but there. Her lips had gone gray. Her breathing was shallow and uneven, like a phone call dropping signal. "Call 911, now!" Evelyn's voice cracked through the silence like a whip, unstill. Nobody moved. She ripped the decorative sash from her own waist, folded it, and pressed it carefully under the woman's head. Her wedding dress pooled around her on the cold cathedral floor, like spilled milk. She didn't care. "Someone help her!" Finally, movement. A groomsman fumbled for his phone. A bridesmaid started crying. Alexander stood at the altar, jaw tight, not moving an inch, not one step. The woman's eyes fluttered open, cloudy and confused. But they found Evelyn's face immediately. And something passed through them. Not fear, recognition. Like she knew her. Like she'd been looking for her. "You're okay," Evelyn whispered, squeezing her frail hand. "I've got you. You're not alone." The woman's cracked lips moved. Barely a sound. But Evelyn heard it. 2 words that made absolutely no sense. 2 words she would not understand. Until it was almost too late. The sirens were already screaming outside. Oh, but the real danger hadn't even walked through the door yet. The cathedral doors burst open. Cold air hit Evelyn like a slap as 2 paramedics rushed in with a stretcher, cutting through the frozen crowd. She was still on her knees, still holding the woman's hand, still in her wedding dress, now smeared with dust from the cathedral floor. "Ma'am, we've got her." A paramedic touched Evelyn's shoulder. She didn't let go immediately. Something about releasing that hand felt wrong, or like dropping someone off a ledge. The woman's eyes were still locked on Evelyn's face, desperate, searching, holding on to her like she was the only real thing in the room. "You're safe," Evelyn whispered one more time. Then strong hands gently pulled her back and the paramedics moved in fast. Evelyn stood slowly. Her knees throbbed. Her dress was ruined. Her bouquet was somewhere on the floor behind her, crushed under someone's expensive shoes. She turned around and stopped breathing. A man stood 6 feet away, completely still in the chaos around him. Tall, dark suit, sharp jaw. He wasn't watching the paramedics. He wasn't looking at the collapsed woman being lifted onto the stretcher. He was looking directly at Evelyn. Not with judgment. Not with the cold irritation she'd seen flash across Alexander's face. With something raw, something almost like disbelief. Like he'd just witnessed something he couldn't explain. Their eyes locked for exactly 3 seconds. And then his jaw tightened and he looked away, down at the elderly woman being wheeled past him on the stretcher. And the color drained from his face. Evelyn watched his hand reach out, then stop midair. Like he wanted to touch the woman, like he knew her. His name was Nicholas Delacroix, and his entire world just cracked open. Nicholas Delacroix didn't do emotions in public, ever. He'd built his entire reputation on being unreadable. Boardrooms, courtrooms, charity galas where everyone wanted something from him. Ice in his veins, steel in his spine. That was the Delacroix way. But right now his hand was shaking. He pressed it flat against his thigh before anyone could notice and watch the stretcher disappear through the cathedral doors. The sirens swallowed the sound of 500 confused wedding guests murmuring around him. It couldn't be her. She was dead. Had been dead for 30 years. He'd stood at a grave at age 7 and watched his father drop a single white rose onto a mahogany coffin. He remembered because it was the only time he'd ever seen Richard Delacroix cry. It couldn't be her. And yet, that face, those eyes, that particular way her fingers had reached for someone else's hand like she was drowning. His mother used to do that. Nicholas. His father's voice cut through the noise like a blade. He turned. Richard Delacroix stood 3 feet away, straightening his cufflinks, face completely composed. Like a woman hadn't just collapsed in his son's wedding. Like the whole ceremony hadn't just imploded. "We need to handle this quietly," Richard said low. "Alexander is humiliated. The press is outside." Nicholas stared at him. "Did you see her? The woman who collapsed?" Something crossed Richard's face, fast, gone in a blink. "A guest had a medical episode. It happens." His father turned away. "Come." Nicholas didn't move, or because that flash across his father's face. That wasn't concern, that was fear. And across the cathedral, Evelyn was watching Nicholas, wondering why a billionaire's son looked like he'd just seen a ghost. The ambulance was gone, but the silence it left behind was louder than the sirens. Evelyn stood outside the cathedral doors, arms wrapped around herself, wedding dress catching the November wind. Her hair was half collapsed from its pins. Her white heels were scuffed. She looked like a bride the storm had chewed up and spat out. She didn't care. Her mind was still on the woman's eyes. That desperate, knowing look. Those 2 whispered words she still couldn't make sense of. "Find him." Find who? Footsteps behind her. She turned. And Nicholas Delacroix was walking straight toward her. No entourage, no phone in his hand. Just him, jacket unbuttoned, moving through the cold with quiet purpose like the chaos inside didn't exist. Evelyn stiffened. He was Alexander's family. She braced for anger, for guilt-tripping, for the polished version of, "How dare you embarrass us?" He stopped 2 feet away and said, "You did the right thing." 4 words. Calm. No performance behind them. Just the plain, quiet weight of someone who meant it. Evelyn blinked. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. Those 4 words cracked something open in her chest that 5 years of good girl and don't ruin this had sealed shut. "She could have died," Evelyn said, as her voice came out smaller than she intended. "She almost did." Nicholas glanced toward the road where the ambulance had vanished. Something moved behind his eyes. Grief, recognition, something ancient and painful he quickly buried. He looked back at her. "Nobody else moved," he said quietly. 500 people. And you were the only one on your knees." Evelyn felt heat rise to her face. Not from flattery, from being seen. For the first time in years, someone looked at Evelyn and saw a person, not a prize, and that terrified her more than the wedding ever did. Her mother's voice could strip paint off walls. "Get back, inside." Each word landed like a separate slap. Linda Carter stood in the cathedral doorway, pearls perfectly aligned, face perfectly furious, finger pointed like a weapon. "Right now, Evelyn. Right now." Evelyn turned from Nicholas slowly. The warmth from 30 seconds ago evaporated instantly. Mom? Don't." Linda grabbed her arm and yanked her through the side door, away from the remaining guests, away from the cameras, away from Nicholas, who watched them go without a word. Inside the small vestibule, Linda released her arm and spun around. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" Her voice dropped to a furious whisper. "Alexander is humiliated. His father is furious. 3 years. 3 years of building this relationship and you blew it up for a stranger?" "She was dying on the floor, Mom. People have medical teams for that." Evelyn stared at her mother, really stared. At the panic behind the fury, at the desperation underneath the anger. This wasn't about love. This was never about love. "What did the Delacroix family promise you?" Evelyn asked quietly. Linda's eyes flickered, just for a second. "Don't be ridiculous. What did they promise you?" "Mom?" Silence. Linda straightened her pearls with sharp, agitated fingers. "You are going back out there. You are apologizing to Alexander, and you are finishing this ceremony. Or what? Or we lose everything." Her mother's voice cracked for the first time. Raw. Exposed. "Everything, Evelyn. Do you understand me?" Evelyn felt the words land in her stomach like stones. Lose everything. What exactly did her family stand to lose? And who exactly had they made that deal with? Would you go back for your family or walk away forever? Comment below. Subscribe. Next chapter exposes a truth nobody saw coming. The dress came off at midnight. Evelyn sat on the edge of the hotel bed in her slip, wedding gown crumpled on the floor like a defeated flag, and stared at the wall. The rehearsal dinner flowers were still on the dresser, still fresh, still mocking her. Her phone had 73 unread messages. She turned it face down. The room was paid for by the Delacroix family. The flowers were chosen by the Delacroix family. Even the hotel suite, the one she'd been told was a wedding gift, was registered under Richard Delacroix's corporate account. She'd never noticed before how little of this was actually hers. Her mother's words kept circling. We lose everything. Not, you'll lose love. Not, you'll lose your future. Everything. Like Evelyn was a business transaction with legs. She pressed her palms against her eyes. And then, Nicholas's voice cut through the noise in her head. Nobody else moved. 500 people. And you were the only one on your knees. She dropped her hands. Why did he say that? Why did Alexander's own family look at her with more genuine respect than Alexander ever had? Why did a man she'd spoken to for 4 minutes make her feel more human than 3 years with his brother? She stood and walked to the window. Manhattan glittered below her, indifferent and enormous. In her eyes dropped to her hand. The engagement ring caught the city light, enormous, blinding, suffocating. She thought about the elderly woman's eyes. Find him. Find who? She pulled the ring off slowly. It sat in her palm, cold and heavy. For the first time, it felt exactly like what it was. A chain. Somewhere across the city, Nicholas Delacroix was pulling up 30-year-old family records. And what he found made him lock his office door. She almost didn't go outside. 3 days of hiding in that hotel room. 3 days of ignored calls, cold room service, and staring at a ring she couldn't bring herself to put back on. 3 days of her mother's voicemails cycling between guilt and fury and something that sounded dangerously close to begging. But the walls were closing in. So Evelyn pulled on jeans, a plain coat, dark glasses, and walked out into the city like a woman escaping a burning building. The coffee shop on Mercer Street was quiet, small, or the kind of place that didn't care who you were or what you'd blown up 3 days ago. She ordered black coffee, took the corner table, and exhaled for what felt like the first time in 72 hours. 8 minutes later, the door opened. Nicholas Delacroix walked in. No suit today. Dark jeans, gray sweater, hair slightly undone. He looked less like a boardroom and more like a person. He was already looking at his phone when he reached the counter. Then some instinct made him glance up. His eyes found hers immediately. Both of them froze. The moment stretched like pulled wire. He could have nodded and looked away. That would have been easier. Cleaner. Smarter for both of them. Instead, he walked over. You look like someone who hasn't slept in 3 days, he said. You look like someone who followed me here, she shot back. Something shifted in his expression. Almost a smile. Not quite. I live 2 blocks away, he paused. May I? Evelyn stared at him, and every sensible thought said no. Sit down, she heard herself say. She didn't know that Nicholas had spent those same 3 days looking for answers, and that those answers led directly back to her. He ordered coffee he never touched. For the first 10 minutes, they talked about nothing. The weather. The neighborhood. Safe, shallow things that neither of them cared about. 2 people circling something neither was ready to name. Then Evelyn put her cup down and looked at him directly. Why did you look at her like that? Nicholas went still. Like what? At the cathedral. Her voice was quiet but steady. When they wheeled her out, you reached for her, then stopped. Like you, she paused. Like you knew her. The coffee shop hummed around them. Someone's espresso machine screamed and settled. Nicholas looked down at his hands. Strong hands. Steady hands. Except right now. Not entirely steady. I thought I did, he said finally. For a second. Who did you think she was? A long silence. My mother. Evelyn didn't speak. She died when I was 7. His voice stayed controlled, but something underneath it moved like a fault line shifting. Car accident. That's what my father told me. That's what everyone told me. He looked up. But I never saw a body. I was 7. Nobody explains things to 7-year-olds. You just accept what adults tell you. And now? His jaw tightened. And now I'm not sure I should have. The air between them changed completely. This wasn't small talk anymore. This was something real and exposed and slightly dangerous. Evelyn thought about her mother's desperate voice. We lose everything. She thought about the old woman's cracked lips. Find him. Her chest tightened. Nicholas. She leaned forward slightly. What was your mother's name? He looked at her for a long moment. Eleanor, he said quietly. Yes, Eleanor Delacroix. The coffee cup in Evelyn's hand began to shake, because the hospital bracelet she'd pocketed at the cathedral read exactly that name. The bracelet burned in her pocket. Evelyn sat completely still, coffee gone cold, heart slamming against her ribs. The hospital bracelet she'd picked up off the cathedral floor, the one she'd told herself she'd hand to a nurse and forgotten about, suddenly felt like a grenade. Eleanor Delacroix, same name, same age, on same eyes that had locked onto Evelyn's face like she was the last familiar thing in a strange world. She couldn't tell him. Not yet. Not here. Are you okay? Nicholas was watching her carefully. Fine. The lie came out too fast. She changed the subject, asked about his work, let him talk. Nodded in the right places while her mind ran in 17 directions simultaneously. After an hour, they walked out together into the cold. Nicholas hailed a cab. Before he stepped in, he turned to her, and his expression was different now, stripped of the boardroom polish. Evelyn. He said her name like it meant something. Whatever my family did to yours, I want you to know that wasn't me. She froze. What do you mean? Whatever your family did. Something crossed his face, a decision being made in real time. My father didn't choose you for Alexander because he liked your smile. His voice dropped low. Your father held something, a legal document, on something that threatened everything my family owns. He paused. When your father died, my family moved fast. The sidewalk tilted under Evelyn's feet. They arranged the marriage, she whispered. Nicholas held her gaze. You were never meant to be a bride, Evelyn. You were meant to be a signature. The cab pulled away, and Evelyn stood alone on the sidewalk realizing her entire life had been a boardroom deal. She went to the hospital alone. No call ahead, no flowers, just Evelyn in a plain coat, bracelet clutched in her fist, walking through the sliding doors of Mount Sinai like someone walking toward a confession. The nurse at the front desk barely looked up. Visiting hours are Eleanor Delacroix. Evelyn placed the bracelet on the counter. She was brought in 3 days ago, cathedral collapse. The nurse's fingers paused over her keyboard. Something careful moved across her face. Are you family? I'm the one who kept her alive on that floor. Evelyn held her gaze. Which is more than her family did. Room 412 was quiet and small. Afternoon light fell across the bed in pale strips. Eleanor lay propped against pillows, silver hair loose around her shoulders, eyes closed. But her breathing was steady, strong even. Evelyn stood in the doorway. Up close, without the chaos of the cathedral, the resemblance was devastating. Nicholas's jaw. Nicholas's brow. and the same particular stillness in the face, like someone trained from birth to reveal nothing. She stepped inside. Eleanor's eyes opened immediately, like she'd been waiting. They stared at each other across the small room. "You came," the old woman said. Her voice was fragile, but her eyes were razor sharp. "You said find him." Evelyn stepped closer. "Who did you mean?" Eleanor's gaze searched her face slowly, carefully, like she was reading something written there a long time ago. "On Nicholas." She said his name like a wound. "My son." Her chin trembled. "He thinks I'm dead. His father told him." Her voice broke. "Richard told him I died." Evelyn's knees weakened. "You've been alive this whole time?" Eleanor gripped her hand with surprising strength. "And Richard knows it." 30 years of silence. One woman kept it. One man enforced it. And now Evelyn was standing in the middle of both. He was already inside her hotel room. Evelyn pushed open the door and stopped dead. Saw Alexander sat in the chair by the window, jacket off, sleeves rolled, one ankle crossed over his knee. Comfortable and entitled in a space that wasn't his, like he owned everything he looked at. "How did you get in here?" Her voice came out sharp. "My family pays for this room." He smiled. That practiced magazine cover smile that no longer fooled her for a single second. "Sit down, Evelyn." "I'll stand." His smile thinned. He unfolded from the chair slowly, deliberately, using his height the way men do when words aren't working. "You embarrassed me." Each word precise, controlled. "In front of 500 people. In front of my father. Do you understand what that cost me?" A woman was dying on the floor, Alexander. There were paramedics outside. There were none inside. Her voice stayed steady even as her heart hammered. "And you didn't move. Not one step." Something ugly flickered behind his eyes. "I come back." He shifted his tone suddenly. Smoother now, almost tender. The version of Alexander that had fooled her for 3 years. "We rescheduled the ceremony, small this time. Private. Nobody has to know about the embarrassment." "Is that what you're worried about?" Evelyn stared at him. "Embarrassment? I'm worried about us." "There is no us, Alexander." The words came out quiet and absolute. "There never was. I was a document to your family, a signature your father needed." The tenderness evaporated instantly. His eyes went cold and flat and completely unfamiliar. "Be very careful," he said softly, "about what you think you know." It wasn't a warning. It was a threat. And Alexander Delacroix had never made empty threats in his life. Nicholas called at 11 p.m. Evelyn almost didn't pick up. She was still shaking from Alexander's visit, still hearing that soft, terrible, "Be very careful." Still sitting in the dark with her coat on like she might need to run. She picked up on the fourth ring. "Are you safe?" His voice was immediate. No greeting, no preamble. Just that, raw and direct. She gripped the phone tighter. "Why wouldn't I be?" "Because Alexander came to see me tonight." A pause. "He told me to stay away from you." The room went very quiet. "What did you say?" "I told him no." Simple, flat, immovable. Evelyn closed her eyes. Something in her chest loosened dangerously. Nicholas, I need to tell you something." His voice shifted. Lower now. Like a confession being dragged up from somewhere deep. "I've been watching you since the cathedral. Not in a strange way. I just..." He stopped. Started again. I've met hundreds of women in my world, Evelyn. Polished, strategic, perfectly positioned women who say exactly the right things. She waited. You ran towards someone nobody else saw. His voice was rough now, or unguarded in a way she suspected very few people ever heard. In a wedding dress, on a marble floor, you held a stranger's hand and told her she wasn't alone. He paused. I've never seen anything like it. Evelyn's throat tightened painfully. I'm not, I'm not special for that. You're the only person in that cathedral who was. Silence stretched between them, warm and terrifying. Evelyn, her name in his mouth again. Yeah, I think I'm falling for you. She pressed her hand flat against her chest because her heart was falling back. But somewhere across the city, Alexander was already making calls. And the person he called wasn't human resources. The envelope was slipped under her door at 6 a.m. Evelyn almost stepped on it. She'd barely slept, Nicholas's words still circling, Alexander's threat still sitting cold in her chest like swallowed ice. She picked it up, turned it over. No stamp. No return address. Just her name in clean, confident handwriting she recognized immediately. Inside, a single card. Hargrove Children's Foundation Gala. Tonight, 8 p.m. Plaza Hotel. I'd like you to be there. N. She read it 3 times. Her first instinct was no. Absolutely not. Walking into a room full of Manhattan's most powerful people on the arm of Alexander Delacroix's brother, 3 days after destroying the wedding, would be social suicide. Her mother would combust. Your Alexander would see it as a declaration of war. She set the card on the dresser, walked away, made coffee, came back and read it again. Nicholas wasn't inviting her to be his accessory. She felt that in the sparse, honest words. No performance, no angle. Just, I'd like you to be there. Like her presence mattered independently of what it cost him. When had anyone last said that? She picked up her phone, called the one person she trusted. Her best friend Dana picked up instantly. Please tell me you're not hiding in that hotel room still? I need a dress, Evelyn said. Dana screamed. 8 hours later, Evelyn walked through the Plaza Hotel entrance in a deep burgundy gown, chin up, shoulders back, looking nothing like a runaway bride and everything like a woman who'd made her choice. Nicholas saw her from across the room, and the look on his face, unguarded, unpolished, completely undone, made every consequence feel worth it. On what she didn't see was Alexander standing in the shadows, watching, already 3 steps ahead. Would you have gone? Comment below. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Next chapter is where everything explodes. The room turned as she walked in. Not dramatically, not all at once. Just that subtle, collective shift, heads angling, conversations dropping half a register, and eyes tracking the woman in burgundy moving through the plaza's grand ballroom like she belonged there and had only just decided to show up. Nicholas met her halfway. No handshake, no formal greeting, just him falling into step beside her naturally, like they'd done this 100 times, like she fit there. You came, he said quietly. Don't make it weird, she said back. He almost smiled. For 2 hours, the gala was almost normal. When Nicholas introduced her to people whose names she recognized from newspapers, she was warm, funny, effortlessly herself. No performance, no Carter family script, just Evelyn. And watching Nicholas watch her be exactly that was something she felt in her spine. Then the evening cracked open. A woman in emerald green appeared at Nicholas's elbow. Sharp eyes, sharper smile. "Nicholas, darling, your father's been trying to reach you." Her gaze slid to Evelyn like a blade. "And you must be the runaway bride. How brave of you to show your face." The surrounding conversations dimmed. Nicholas stepped forward slightly. "That's enough, Catherine." "Richard wants a word," Catherine continued smoothly. "Tonight, both of you." Her smile never wavered. "He says it's about the hospital patient, the woman from the cathedral." Her eyes locked on Evelyn's. "He says you've been visiting her." The blood drained from Evelyn's face. They knew. Richard Delacroix knew she'd found Eleanor. Nicholas's hand found the small of her back. Steady, grounding, but his jaw was granite. Richard Delacroix didn't request meetings. He issued summons. And people who ignored them had a way of disappearing quietly. Richard Delacroix's office felt like a coffin. Evelyn walked in beside Nicholas. Mahogany walls, no windows, air that smelled like leather and old money, and something colder underneath. Richard sat behind a desk the size of a small country, silver hair perfectly combed, hands folded like a man who'd never lost anything in his life, because he'd always taken it first. "Sit." Not an invitation. Neither of them sat. Something shifted behind Richard's eyes. Respect or irritation. With men like him, it was the same thing. "You've been visiting the woman at Mount Sinai." His gaze landed on Evelyn like a paperweight. "That ends tonight?" "She's a patient," Evelyn started. "She's a complication." His voice was flat as concrete, final as a locked door. Nicholas stepped forward. "Who is she, father?" The room temperature dropped 10 degrees. "Nobody." Richard's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "A confused elderly woman with a history of delusions. The hospital has been informed. She'll be transferred tomorrow to a private facility." "You're having her moved?" Nicholas's voice was dangerously quiet. "I'm managing the situation." "Like you managed it 30 years ago?" The words left Nicholas like a bullet. Quiet, imprecise, irreversible. Richard's composure cracked, just for 1 second. One devastating second, before it sealed back over like ice reforming on water. "Careful, son. Her name is Eleanor." Nicholas's voice broke slightly on the name. "And I remember her hands. I remember her voice." His eyes burned. "And I remember you crying at an empty grave." Silence detonated across the room. Richard stood slowly. Full height, full weight. "You remember nothing," he said softly. But Evelyn was already pulling out her phone. The recording had been running for 6 minutes. They didn't speak until they hit the cold air outside. Nicholas walked fast, jaw tight, hands shoved deep in his pockets, the kind of controlled movement that meant something enormous was being held together by sheer will. Evelyn matched his pace, heart slamming, phone burning in her coat pocket like evidence at a crime scene. Because that's exactly what it was. And half a block from the building, Nicholas stopped. Just stopped. Like his legs made a decision his mind hadn't approved yet. He stood facing the street, shoulders rigid, Manhattan traffic washing past them like nothing had just exploded upstairs. Evelyn waited. "I knew." His voice came out wrecked, raw in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. "Some part of me always knew that grave was wrong." He turned to face her. Eyes red-rimmed, jaw working. "I was 7 years old and they put me in a suit and told me to be strong, and I believed them." His voice fractured. 30 years? Evelyn, I believed them for 30 years. She didn't think. She stepped forward and put both arms around him. He went completely still. Then something in him broke open entirely, and he held on like a man who'd been drowning quietly for 3 decades and had finally found something solid. They stood there on the sidewalk, two people holding each other up while the city moved indifferently around them. When he finally pulled back, his eyes searched her face. You recorded it. Not a question. Every word. She held his gaze steadily. He can't touch her now. Something moved across Nicholas's face. Gratitude and grief and something deeper. Something that had been building since a cathedral floor and a woman in a wedding dress who refused to walk away. Evelyn. His voice was barely above a whisper. I love you. She'd been running from the wrong man her entire life, and running toward this one without ever realizing it. The federal warrant hit at 7 a.m. Evelyn watched from Nicholas's car as 3 black SUVs pulled simultaneously into the Delacroix private medical facility on the Upper East Side. A pristine, expensive building that didn't appear on any public hospital registry. The kind of place that existed specifically for situations like this. Making people disappear quietly. Yes, Nicholas was already out of the car before it fully stopped. Inside, chaos dressed in expensive suits. Facility staff scrambling. Lawyers materializing from nowhere. Phones pressed to ears. Damage control happening in real time. 2 federal agents moved through the lobby with the calm, devastating efficiency of people who'd done this before. Richard Delacroix stood in the center of it all, still composed, still silver-haired, still immaculate, until he saw Nicholas. On something crossed his face that Evelyn had never seen there before. Shame. Where is she? Nicholas's voice was ice and fire simultaneously. Richard opened his mouth. 3rd floor. One of the federal agents answered instead. She's secure. Nicholas took the stairs. Evelyn followed. Room 301 was nothing like Mount Sinai. No afternoon light. No pale strips of warmth. Just white walls, white sheets, and Eleanor sitting upright in the bed. Eyes sharp, chin raised, hands folded like a woman who'd survived 30 years of disappearing and refused to disappear again. When Nicholas walked through the door, she broke completely. Nikki. The childhood name came out like something she'd been holding in her mouth for 3 decades. Nicholas crossed the room in 4 steps and dropped to his knees beside her bed. This powerful, composed, unbreakable man, and buried his face in his mother's hands like a 7-year-old boy who'd never stopped grieving. Would Eleanor pressed her lips to his hair. I'm here, she whispered. I never stopped loving you. Evelyn stood in the doorway and wept silently for everything they'd both lost. Downstairs, Richard Delacroix was being read his rights. Alexander had already fled the building. But Evelyn's recording had names, dates, and 30 years of buried truth. There was nowhere left to run. 6 months later, Alexander Delacroix was convicted, and Evelyn sat in the 3rd row of the federal courtroom and watched the verdict land on him like a building collapsing. Conspiracy. Fraud. 30 years of buried evidence finally dragged into fluorescent light where it couldn't survive. Richard Delacroix had taken a plea deal. The price of his freedom, a full confession. Every name, every date, every document her father had died protecting. She hadn't cried in that courtroom. She'd promised herself she wouldn't. She kept that promise. And outside the courthouse steps, the November air hit clean and cold, exactly like that cathedral morning 6 months ago that had broken her life open like an egg. Nicholas was waiting at the bottom of the steps. No suit today, just him. Hands in his pockets, shoulders relaxed, eyes finding hers the moment she pushed through the doors. The same way they'd found her across every room since a marble cathedral floor and a woman in a wedding dress who refused to look away, as she walked down to him slowly. "It's done," she said. "It's done," he agreed. They stood together in the thin winter sunlight. No performance, no audience, just two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of other people's secrets and chosen, deliberately, painfully, beautifully, to stay. "Eleanor wants Sunday dinner," Nicholas said. "She's already called twice this morning." Evelyn laughed. Actually laughed, full and unguarded and completely free. Nicholas watched her laugh like it was the most extraordinary thing he'd ever seen. Then quietly, he took her hand. Not like a transaction, not like ownership, like a choice. Evelyn Carter walked into that cathedral a woman living someone else's life. She walked out of that courthouse living her own. And the elderly woman nobody noticed changed everything. And just like that, it's done. But here's what I need from you. Did Evelyn make the right choice running from that altar? Just drop your answer below. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Every day on this channel, real stories, raw emotion, human truth. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next story coming to this channel will hit even harder than this one. You don't want to miss it. And if this was your first time here, welcome home.